are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh yes, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. Yes, you are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. Oh, you are a waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh yeah, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Yeah. Oh yes, that is who you are. My waymaker, Jesus, always working, always moving. That is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Oh, that is who you are. 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 Yeah. Oh, that is who you are.
Hey, and welcome to Prairie Lakes Church Online. And hey, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. We're just really thankful for you and glad that you are here with us today.
Absolutely. Hey, we hope that you are holding up well amidst all the heat and even this dry season that we appear to be in here as we enter summer. Cody, I don't know about you, how's your lawn holding up?
Not good.
Oh, great.
Not watered, not mowed, not good.
So sorry to call out your lawn right here online. But anyway, to all you dads out there, like Cody said, happy Father's Day. Cody has owned a few homes. I own a home now for the very first time in my life. We're some young adults still figuring out how apparently to mow and water our lawns. So we hope you're holding up well amidst the heat. Dads, hint, happy Father's Day. If you got advice on how to care for our lawns, hit us up in the chat right now. We'll take any support you can offer. Help the millennials out. That would be great. But regardless, as you jump in today, we want you to know that we exist as a no matter church. And what that means is that no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or even what's been done to you, we truly believe that God loves you and you can look for God here. You don't have to have it all figured out. You do not have to be perfect. You don't even have to believe everything that we believe. It is great that you're checking things out and you can just start the journey and start exploring here with us today.
And hey, if you are new or newer to Prairie Lakes Church, we are especially glad that you're here. And I would just love to get to know you and connect with you and help you take a step here at Prairie Lakes Church. So if that's you, we have a gift for you. If you let us know who you are by filling out our welcome card, it takes about 30 seconds. In your email today, we'll get you an Amazon gift card just because we just believe you matter to God and you matter to us. So if you text PLC to 797979 or click the link in the chat, take 30 seconds to fill it out. We'll get you that Amazon gift card here today.
Yeah, don't miss the opportunity. And hey, I happen to be our Next Steps pastor here at Prairie Lakes Church. And so generally we are very interested, and I'm very interested in taking next steps. But when you're connected to Next Steps, you are growing with God. You're taking intentional steps with God. You're growing deeper in relationship with Him and other people. And one of those steps is connecting relationally. And just want to talk about a really simple step that you could take to continue connecting relationally here, especially over the summer as you're going out all over the place or maybe taking advantage of this new season as we enter this post-COVID world. So Cody, tell us a little bit about what you're doing online to help people connect relationally.
Yeah, so one of the great ways that we have to connect online is through our online campus Facebook group. And it is just a great way to share prayer requests, get to know each other. We host events like this week we had an online campus hangout over lunch. So if you go to our Facebook page, you go under the groups tab, you'll see our online campus group. You can join that, and we would just love to get to know you. And Chris, you were there this week during our online campus hangout, and it was just a good time to get to know each other, chat a little bit, joke around, get to know a little more about Prairie Lakes. But yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. It was just an hour time where we got to get to know a couple people. I got to sit in as a part of Prairie Lake staff and get to know some of our online people who make up our campus here. It was just a whole lot of fun. We played a game, talked about each other's lives, talked about what we were eating together, and I was just impressed stepping away of I just felt a little more connected to everybody. I still thought about it days later, and it was totally worth my time. So if you're interested in staying a little bit more connected to the online community, this could be a great opportunity, one, to be a part of that Facebook group, but also just to maybe even check out, let's jump on a Zoom, let's hang out together, let's stay connected to our little Iowa here in Iowa itself, but also across the country as people start to get connected to Prairie Lakes online, both outside and inside Iowa. It's just a lot of fun to be a part of. And honestly, we would not be able to do that and offer these opportunities online or expand our reach online without you giving generously and being part of the mission. Prairie Lakes Church is on a mission to reach Iowa, to launch a campus a year and then move disciples, no matter followers, people who love Jesus, going out into the little Iowa to love people and display Jesus each and every day. And we have the opportunity to do that in online community for people who live in Iowa who maybe aren't near a campus yet, and also have a bit of a wider reach of people who know about Prairie Lake Church, or maybe some other people, friends and family who live in Iowa too. And so if you're interested in contributing to the mission that Prairie Lakes Church is on to reach Iowa, both digitally and physically, I want to encourage you to give generously. We believe that's just a part of following Jesus and loving him as being a part of his mission through the local church. And so you can do that by giving online. You can now give specifically to the online campus and what Cody is working to move forward at this campus. And so again, you can do that online through our website, or you can still send a check to our central office at 5250 Nordic Drive in Cedar Falls, Iowa. So if you're feeling that nudge to give generously, don't miss the opportunity to start contributing to God's mission here at Prairie Lakes Church.
And hey, we are entering into week 3 of our Reach series, so we're going to hear from Pastor Jesse. So let's get prepared to hear today's message.
Hello and welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. I am really glad that you are here and joining us this weekend. And before we get to anything else, let me just say this. And I know the weekend host has already said it, but let me say it to you again. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, or happy Father's Day weekend, all right? So before we get too much further down the road, let me just take a second. And again, I know at your campus, we've already heard some of this, but let me just give me some grace and let me just say a couple of things to you, especially if you're a dad, and especially if you're a dad who's in the middle of raising kids, okay, like me. So mine are 8 and 11, yours might be a little younger, yours might be a little older, but if you're a dad who's in the middle of the season of raising kids, a couple things for you. First, and this is probably the most important, okay? Dad's best gift you can give your family, your wife, your kids, the best gift you can give them is to be a man who spends time with Jesus. Okay? Best gift you can give them. Best gift you can give is being someone who kind of hangs around Jesus, who starts looking and talking and acting more like him. Jesus is absolutely alive. He's revealed himself in Scripture. He listens to you when you pray. When you give him room, he speaks to you. Best gift you can give your family this Father's Day. Before safety and a good house and income and stability and advice and all those other great gifts that we as dads give our family, the best gift you can give is for you to be a man who spends time with Jesus and letting him change you from the inside out so that you love your family like Jesus loves you. That's first, okay? Second is this, dads. Fatherhood was God's idea. I mean, think about this. When God went to create this world, he thought up dads, which is awesome, I think. So what does that mean? Just being a dad in and of itself is a holy, and it's a spiritual, and it's a divinely designed and divinely commissioned job. It is. Now, practically, it looks a little bit less spiritual, okay? Practically, it looks like cutting the grass and making sure the cars actually have oil in them, and making sure that your kids don't do anything that's too stupid, and then when they do, disciplining them, and all that other stuff that at times can feel like more of a headache than a privilege, okay? Nevertheless, being a dad is it's a sacred thing because God created it. He's the one that designed it. And although none of us dads are anywhere near perfect, here's the deal. When your kid thinks about God as their father, like it or not, fair or not, their first picture probably is going to be you. Okay? And that's an awesome responsibility. So, cut the grass, say yes to playing catch, do the daddy-daughter dates, all of that. Because why? Because everything that you do faithfully and humbly and diligently and consistently is a picture not only of what it means to be a good dad, it's a picture of our good God. All right? So, happy Father's Day, okay? Hey, for the rest of us, welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. I hope you're having a great start to your summer. If this is your first weekend around here, you're jumping into a series that we've been in for a couple of weeks now. It's a series that we've called Reach. Here's the idea, okay? One of the best things about living in Iowa, and there are several, okay, but one of the best things is that we get all 4 seasons. And it's awesome. And with each season comes kind of a different rhythm. And we embrace that around here. So we've hit summer in Iowa, summer season, summer rhythm. Well, better put, probably, summer kind of hit us. Summer kind of smacked us in the face, right? But we're not going to complain. We're not going to do the Iowa thing, complain about warm temps, okay? We pray for rain, but remember, it also could be 20 below, okay? But in Iowa, summer and summer rhythms find us in a few different places, depending on who you are, like weekends at the baseball diamond or the softball diamond. I've been there. Times by the pool, maybe for recreation, maybe because of swim lessons. Times out on the water, get on the lake or on the river. Parties or fires out in the backyard or back deck. Camping, day trips. I mean, we lather up with sunscreen and off. And we crawl out of our hibernation, white legs and all. And there's just some great rhythms that we get a chance to be in as Iowans in the summer. Just great. And around here at Prairie Lakes, they give us some pretty great opportunities to do something that we call Reach Our Little Iowa. So here's how Pastor John defined that for us a couple of weeks ago. Little Iowa, here's what we mean. Little Iowa is where you live and where you work and where you play. We're talking about our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, our relatives, our servers, just regular contact people. At Prairie Lakes, we want to reach our little Iowa, and that's kind of what we mean by that. And summer gives us some great opportunities for us to do just that. So as we've been in this series, kind of getting our minds and our actions around that, here's where we've been so far, okay? Week 1 of the series, we started talking about reorienting our heart. Before we talk about anything we're supposed to do, like what's going on inside of us. And we issued a challenge every week. The challenge for week 1 was just a prayer walk. We challenged each of you in your little Iowa. And some of us live out in the country where we don't have neighbors next door. Some of us have plenty of neighbors. Some of us, our little Iowa's a little bit more of like our family or extended. Some of us are little Iowa's kind of our co-workers. Wherever it was for you, we just challenged you. Hey, what if you started to kind of prayerfully walk around and just asking God to reorient your heart? Start seeing those people a little bit different. That was week 1. Week 2 was shift your gaze. That's where we were just last weekend, and we challenge you to be more intentional as you're walking around or as you're kind of starting to see people, like be interruptible. Maybe see what God is up to a little bit, right? Dip your toe into that. Don't just pray and walk, kind of expect God to do something. Be intentional. This weekend, where we are, is we're going to be talking about drawing it out. So at the end of our service today, your weekend host is going to talk about Below the Surface Challenge, which we'll get to. That's where we are this weekend. And the next weekend, as we finish the series, we're going to be talking about making the invite, okay? So let's take another step this weekend and just jump into a few things around here when it comes to drawing it out. Here's where I want to start. I want to start with a few stories, okay? A few stories. So each of these stories happened to me in the last 2 weeks since we've started this series, okay? It's kind of crazy. So here's a few snapshots. Snapshot 1. A couple of weeks ago, I found myself helping one of my old neighbors move. Now, it's been a couple of years since his family and my family were in the same neighborhood, but we were for a number of years, raising kids kind of the same season. Our family moved, stayed in Waterloo where we're at. His family moved over to Cedar Falls, and then this most recent one was up in Waverly, just north. And we got to be good friends and good enough to where I'm just saying, hey man, I'd love to help you move, and he took me up on it, okay? So, but while we were neighbors in the same neighborhood, I had a chance to meet his father-in-law, okay? And his father-in-law lives out in northwest Iowa, and so he'd come into town, great guy. He's a farmer, you know? But like a lot of us, had a little bit of a mess, and his was alcohol. He had a drinking problem, and he knew it, okay? Now, he and I would have some great conversations around my neighbor's back deck and in the garage. We talk about a ton of stuff, faith and marriage and all of that, even some of his drinking problem. But long story short, he got sober, and God really grabbed his heart. I mean, he was kind of like a lot of us, just kind of going to church, kind of not. But there was a great Methodist church out where he's at. A pastor really invested in him, and so a couple of weeks ago, I'm helping my neighbor move. He's there. He's in from northwest Iowa, and we're just talking about, he's talking about this change that has taken place in him. And he's talking about, this is what I loved. He starts talking about like how weird it was, to feel something at church. He's like, sometimes I cry. I'm like, yeah, that's right, you know? And he's talking about how burdened he feels for his friends and his kids and his grandkids to know this God, to know this Jesus. It's awesome, okay? Snapshot number 1, okay? Snapshot number 2, I was up in Decorah this past Monday at our monthly gathering up there. We're gonna launch a church up in Decorah on Christmas Eve, God willing, okay? And anyways, I'm at the monthly gathering at Toppling Goliath. I'm talking to a lady I've never met before, I don't think, and she sees my name tag and she goes, hey, what's your last name? And I say, Tink, and she goes, you know, I think you know my sister. I'm like, really? You know? And long story short, okay, her sister worked in the same office that my mom worked for several years, a desk over. My mom was church secretary, and so her sister worked she was my like second mom at my mom's workplace, all right? Crazy connection, okay? Third snapshot, I am in a Wednesday night men's golf league, and I am a horrible golfer. All right, I am not good, but I have a lot of fun, and I'm with one of my buddies who's one of our new elders. Anyways, last Wednesday, we're waiting for our other pairing to show up. There's 2-person teams, and so one team plays with another team. Well, the other pairing doesn't show up. Don't know why. But for whatever reason, we do get paired with someone else who's only there because of a substitution. The circumstances were kind of weird, but anyways, like one of the guys that we're now paired with has a kid with him, his son's with him. And I think I recognize his son because I think he and my son played on the same baseball team like 2 years ago, a team that I coached. And sure enough, it was him and his dad. And then the other guy that was playing with him, I'd never met before. As I introduced myself, he knew my brother and had played with him in a golf tournament annually for a long time, like the last several years. It's kind of a crazy connection, okay? Finally, again, this all happened like the last 2 or 3 weeks for me. I got a text from my current neighbor Monday, okay, out of the blue, talking about kind of like how we need to do a better job of like getting to each other's backyards this summer. And in fact, let me just, I got to read this text to you that he gave me, okay? Here's what he says. He says, hey, can the Amish drink beer? and then he follows up by saying, you guys are more than welcome anytime to come on over, right? And so Amish is kind of a joke for me. It's like his reference for me being a pastor. Okay, all right, so crazy coincidences in these last 2 or 3 weeks, and that's not normal for me. I'm describing something that's not my norm. I'm not Pastor John who like everywhere I go, I just meet these strangers and they come to know Jesus because I'm so awesome, right? Like he's incredible like that. This doesn't happen to me all the time, but maybe like you, I've been taking some intentional steps as we try to get a little bit better at this. And I think what happens is as we all do this, okay, God honors that. He does. I think he starts bringing some opportunities our way that he wouldn't have before because our eyes weren't up and we weren't reorienting and we weren't shifting and we weren't doing some of these things, but when we do, he honors that and he does what only he can do, right? Remember what Pastor John said last week, okay? He says, you can't notice God working unless you shift your gaze. And he went on to say, hey, there's some intentional shifts we need to make from being busy to being interruptible, from being aloof to being alert, from being holier than thou to just being holy or just being approachable. And I genuinely think as we do that, as we start to get a little bit more obedient in that aspect of our lives, I think, because what it is, we're more aligned with who God is and what he's after, that God starts partnering with us in ways that maybe he just couldn't before, okay? So that's just the last 2 or 3 weeks. I hope that you have some stories like that as well. If you don't, it might be because you're not taking some of those steps, okay? So do that with me because I think God's gonna honor that. So now, the question is this. Now what? Now what? Because for me, I'm going to probably run into that guy at Golf League again, I'm going to guess. I'm going to be in my neighbor's backyard. Now that we've reoriented our heart and we've shifted our gaze, and now that God might be opening up some doors in our little Iowas with people and conversations, now what? Because for some of us, even taking the steps that we've taken for the last couple of weeks, those were big steps. Those were big steps, maybe even uncomfortable. Even something like going on a prayer walk or being interruptible was like, okay, it's a step of faith. But the idea then of maybe actually being in a conversation with someone that might go below the surface and might even get spiritual, I mean, for some of us, that's enough to put us like right over the edge. Because why? Because we're worried that we're not going to do it right, or we're going to screw it up, or we're worried that we're not going to have the right answers, or that we're going to be this weird Jesus salesman that's supposed to do some kind of awkward spiritual bait and switch, like, hey, thanks for the invite to come over. Let me return the favor with an invite to eternity, or something weird like that, right? I mean, we have these fears, okay? So that's why we're going to say this weekend as we take another step and we talk about drawing it out. Here's what we're going to say. By draw it out, here's what we mean. Drawing out is discovering what God is already up to in someone's life as we uncover their story. Let me just say that one more time, okay? By drawing it out, the step we're going to take is discovering what God is already up to in someone else's life as we uncover their story. And where we're going to be is John 4. So go ahead and find that. We're going to have some of the verses on the screen here as well as you follow along. But this weekend, it's about drawing it out. And here's what we mean by that. It's discovering. It's discovering what God is already up to. As you uncover their story, it's not selling them something. It's not some sort of bait and switch. We're not going to give you some sort of like these weird, surface level tools where you can kind of like, trick someone into a spiritual conversation. It's none of that. It's natural. And there's a great example of how Jesus did this in the scripture we're going to read as he drew out a woman's story as they were doing something very normal. They were sharing a cold drink on a hot summer day, okay? So what I want to do is let's just start reading some of this together. Let's start in John 4 and verse 3. Read along with me, either in your own Bible or on the screen here, okay? So Jesus left Judea, and he went back once more to Galilee. Now, in order to go from Judea to Galilee, he had to go through this region called Samaria. We're going to talk more about that. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said this to her, "Hey, would you mind giving me a drink? Would you give me a drink?" Now, his disciples had gone to town to buy food. Otherwise, they probably would have done it. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" And the comment that John gives us, because he knows some of us who read this aren't going to understand, but Jews do not associate with Samaritans. That's how the story starts, all right? So get this, it's noon, it's midday, which means, and it's summer, which means it's hot, just like it is now, okay? And if you traveled to Israel today, you could visit wells that were literally dug in Jesus' day, which is crazy. It's kind of mind-blowing. They dug down so deep to get to this water cool below, and it's mostly been unchanged since antiquity. So cold drink on a hot summer's day, that's the setting. Now, we don't have all the time in the world to explain exactly what John means by that comment, but we do have time to make a couple of notes here. A couple of things are worth noting. First is this: Samaritans and Jews, those categories were racial categories. They were religious categories, they were cultural categories, but really they were racial categories. That's the note about them not associating, okay? The Jews saw themselves as a race set apart by God, separated from the rest of the world, pure. Okay, that's how they saw themselves. And then they saw the Samaritans as impure. And here's why. Here's why. Hundreds of years before this encounter, hundreds of years ago, the ancient Jewish nation of Israel split. And they split into two kingdoms. Israel in the north, retaining the name, and then Judah in the south. Okay? North and south, and there's a whole reason why, but Israel in the north moves their capital to a town called Samaria, and then in the south, it's Jerusalem, all right? So you got people in the north, you got people in the south. Now, eventually, both nations reject the faith of their ancestors, they reject God, and both nations are conquered, Israel and Judah. But Israel was conquered first. And they were conquered by a nation of Assyria. And if you remember the story of Jonah and Nineveh, that's the Assyrians, okay? Now what the Assyrians did with conquered people is they would deport them to a different place in their empire, and then they would force those people to intermarry with a different culture, and then they would resettle them in their place of origin. And they did this to obliterate the cultures of the people they conquered and establish their own. Pretty cruel, okay? Now, that's what they did to the Samaritans. The Samaritans were actually Jewish people from Israel in the northern kingdom who were conquered, deported, intermarried, and then resettled. That's their story. And so, Jewish people in the south, especially in the region of Galilee where Jesus was from, they viewed their Samaritan neighbors to the north as literally half-breeds, as offensive as that term is. That's how they saw them. And the Samaritans in the north viewed their neighbors to the south as what? Judgmental, holier than thou, hypocritical jerks. Okay? Now, in fact, the Samaritans set up their own versions of the temple and other parts of the Jewish faith, primarily because they knew their neighbors in the south were not going to welcome them to the temple of their ancestors. So, long story short, these two races of people, they hated each other over several hundred years to the point of violent conflict at a few different points. That's that parenthetical comment there, okay? Now, enter Jesus. Jesus does not care about any of that. And with one simple question, he destroys all the barriers that could have easily remained in the way between him and this woman. One simple question. And it wasn't even like a killer question. All it was, hey, would you mind getting me a drink? So here's what I want you to get out of that simple question. Spiritual conversations rarely start on a spiritual level. Almost always they start on a surface level. God can do so much with your normal, everyday conversations and connections. Start normal, not spiritual. See, Jesus could have easily drawn that water himself. He's a man, probably more physically capable than her, I don't know. But he's a Jew from Galilee. She's a Samaritan from the north. But he doesn't. He doesn't do that. He's in her territory at the well that she frequents. And so he's going to engage with her on her terms. Not with some sort of like scripture sharing or miraculous sign or anything like that, but with a simple, normal human request. Would you mind getting me something to drink? And with that simple, surface level, normal request, what came along with that, you gotta understand, was an implied invitation. Seriously. Because now, over a drink, if they wanted to, they could chat, they could talk, they could connect. They didn't have to. But there was an option now. There was an implied invitation in this. So let's not miss this, okay? Don't underestimate the power of a simple invitation to a normal thing. Don't underestimate the power of that. Inviting someone into your normal everyday life might be the very thing that changes someone's mind, not just about you, but about God. In all seriousness. That seems like an exaggeration. You're making it, no. See, Jesus, as we read this story, he's going to end up learning about this woman. She's going to end up learning a ton about him. But before any of that happens, she is just floored that Jesus, a Jewish man, would even be willing to talk to her. And believe it or not, and I know some of us don't think this way, but believe it or not, there are people in your little Iowa who might have that same impression of you, especially if they kind of know you're a church-going person. They just assume a few things about us, that we're not interested in them, that we probably think we're better than them, that we wouldn't have anything in common, that we're Amish people who don't drink beer, okay? Right? But a simple invitation is sometimes all that someone needs in order to change their mind, not only about you, but about God. Now, Jesus goes on to have a very deep and interesting conversation with her. And basically, if we read it, he would use the literal water that they're drinking as a metaphor for the kind of life that he can offer. But just like if any of us were in this woman's shoes, she was confused as to what he was talking about, right? And I can't blame her, because she's not quite tracking, and she basically ends up thinking that Jesus is offering her like literally magic water, which would forever quench her literal thirst, so that she doesn't have to be out in this hot sun carrying water anymore. And Jesus plays along for a little bit. And so now that he knows she's on the hook for this magic water, what does he do? Well, he says, hey, well, go tell your family about this. Bring him back. I'll give him this magic water too. Picking it up in verse 16, okay? Read this along with me. He told her, go call your husband and come back, right? Well, I have no husband, she replied. And Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you've just said is quite true. Now, okay, we don't know why she's had 5 husbands. We don't. And we have to be careful of what we're assuming. And you always do when you encounter something that's a little bit different in someone's story. You gotta be careful of what you assume. But what we can say is 5 husbands is a lot of husbands. It's a lot of husbands. And maybe she was widowed with 1 or 2, and maybe some of them dissolved and it wasn't really her fault, But probably she was kind of messy. And probably didn't have a great eye for what kind of man she should be hitching her wagon to either. I mean, messy as she might have been, I'm sure some of the men she'd called husband for a time weren't exactly great specimens themselves. But because Jesus is Jesus, because he is who he is, he knows her story already. Without her even saying a thing, he knows the the messier parts of her story. But here's what I want you to see, okay? Spend enough time with someone. You don't have to be Jesus. Just spend enough time with them and you'll learn their story. And if you listen long enough to their story, they'll probably trust you with some of their mess. And if you navigate that mess with grace and truth like Jesus, they just might trust him. Look at what Jesus does here, okay? She tells him just the tip of the iceberg of her story, and he tells her the rest. He tells her not just her truth, but all of her truth. And basically Jesus says this, I see you, I see you. Not just the person you've presented yourself to be, but who you actually are, mess and all, I see you. But notice what Jesus doesn't do. He doesn't try and fix her mess. He doesn't try and teach her about the sanctity of marriage. He doesn't try to convict her of her sin, force her to admit that she's doing something wrong. And nor is Jesus repelled by her mess. It's not an awkward place for him to be in this conversation. He's not uncomfortable. And at this point, this woman knows that Jesus knew who she really was before he even asked her for a drink. He's not discovering her story in real time. He knew it before he walked over. But he walked over anyway. And not only that, he asks her for a drink. He's an invitation. Let's chat for a little bit. And he sat with her over a couple of glasses of water on a hot day, and he engaged in conversation with her. And when he knew her story, he didn't think any differently about her or act any differently toward her. Instead, he leans in. And even though he knew her truth, he extended grace. He wasn't put off by her story. He in fact, it was the opposite. He was interested in being a part of it. It reminds me of a phrase that Pastor Chris has said to a lot of us on staff as he's coached us over the years. Here's the phrase. He says, hey, be more interested than interesting. Be more interested than interesting. I love that phrase. If God opens the door for you in your little Iowa, okay? If you've reoriented your heart and you've shifted your gaze and you've either been invited into someone else's life or you've invited them into yours, be more interested than interesting. Because even the people who don't like talking about themselves, and I'm one of those, eventually they like talking about themselves. If you're more interested than interesting, if you're not just truthful but gracious. So let's finish the story here in verse 19 now, and we're going to come to a close. So, sir, the woman said, I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the only place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, which sounds like really harsh. Believe me, a time is coming when you'll worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you don't know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they're the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in the truth. And the woman said, I know that Messiah called Christ is coming. I know. And when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. So here's the crazy thing about this woman's story. Messy as she might be, she has some kind of a faith story. She already does. I mean, we don't know exactly what it was or how serious it was in her life or how relevant it was for her, anything like that. But it was there. Like, she had some, messy as she was, whatever, like, she had some encounters and stuff with God already. And as she shares those with Jesus, Jesus starts to just interact with it. And he redirects it and refocuses it. And he points her eventually to him. But here's the thing that you and I need to take away from this part of the story. Don't be surprised to find that God was already at work in someone's life, because before you invited them, God did. Don't be surprised. Before you had the courage to be obedient, God was already at work. And that should take a lot of the pressure off of us, because here's what I mean. What if rather than being worried about how you're going to worm God into your conversation, you instead just sat back and you just learned someone's story over the course of normal life? And maybe you saw their mess, and then what if you just looked for how God was already interacting with them? What if you didn't make it your job to persuade them or convict them or disapprove or whatever, and you just interacted with what they believe, and then you shared what you believe? Doesn't that sound a lot less, I don't know, hard? Maybe even fun. Hey, your host is going to come up and just take you to the next step, all right? Because we want to issue a challenge in light of what we've experienced this weekend. But before they do that, let me just pray over us, okay? Father in heaven, help us this week to remember that you're already at work, and that it's really not our job to save or anything like that. It's just our job to be obedient. And would we trust you with that as we draw out people's story and see how you're already at work? So Jesus, I pray all of that in your name. Amen.
Each week during our Reach series, we've boiled down to just one challenge, just one practical thing that we can all walk out with to do to reach those around us. And this week is to get below the surface. And what that practically looks like is to have conversations that are maybe a little more intentional, maybe a little more vulnerable, because what I find myself doing a lot, and probably what a lot of us find ourselves doing, is having conversations that kind of sound like, hey, Chris, how about that weather?
Oh, it's hot. Cody, how's your lawn?
Dead. Right. And it doesn't really get below the surface. I don't get to learn about Chris or learn about what he's going through or feeling. We don't get to further build or develop our relationship. So as we go out, let's think of more intentional questions. Maybe something like, hey, Chris, this last year has been really hard and we haven't seen each other in a long time. So I'd really just be curious to hear what it's been like, maybe a high point of the last pandemic year for you.
That is a good question. That's a nice question, a kind one. Actually, in the midst of a kind of a crazy pandemic year, we've been pretty fortunate where we were actually able to buy a house and get a dog. Those were actually some really cool high points for us.
Nice. And what has it been like owning a dog?
That is also a very good follow-up question, and I love it because it does. It digs a little deeper at both, what I'm actually experiencing, and also really what he's getting at is how I'm feeling and how it's impacting me. So, in real time, it has been great. We love our dog. His name's Mojave, after our favorite desert, and he's great. But the reality is, it's also been really frustrating because he's actually a puppy, and there's this strange thing with young dogs where they're super, super cute, but they're just terrible listeners, and he has so much energy. So honestly, it's been really, really fun, but it's also been really frustrating. I didn't know I could get so angry at this cute little thing. So it's been an interesting learning curve.
So that is really it. Let's just all be thinking just how we can ask more intentional questions. Just be in prayer for who God might have you have those conversations with and what they might look like. So let's all do that this week. And kids, and just 60 seconds and 1 minute, children's programming is going to begin. So get ready for that. And everyone else, thanks for joining us. Again, happy Father's Day, and we'll see you back next week.
Stay cool.
Today is Father's Day. I love it. It's one of my favorite holidays. And last year on Mother's Day, Ellen was up here and her kids came up and they gave her big hugs. So I'm so excited for that. And actually, hey, it's my daughter Megan. You guys have met Megan before. Megan are doing Kids Online. Hey, guess what? It's Father's Day.
It is. Could I borrow the car?
Could you borrow the car? Actually, I have the key here, and
Thank
so,
you. Bye, kids.
Okay, well, that didn't go the way that I thought, but hey, Father's Day, actually, look, it's my daughter Erica. You guys have met Erica this week, and
Hey, guys.
hey, Erica, it's Father's Day.
Yeah, did you use my car?
Yeah, I ran some errands in your car.
Yeah, do you think you could fill it up with gas?
Yes, I will put gas in your car, Erica.
Great, thanks. Bye, kids.
Okay. Well, if your dad is there, I know he would love to be hugged, so why don't you get up right now and give him a big hug, and, well, I guess we should jump into this week's videos, and then we'll, they do love me, look at this. We'll see you next week.
Mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Y'all ready?
Yeah.
Press play.
Jesus, we know we belong here because of your love for us that goes on and on forever. Jesus, we know you are with us wherever we go. You're there, we'll always be together.
So sing along with me for all the joy he brings.
It's going down. Get in the mix.
We're not stopping.
Get in the
The
mix.
party's hopping.
Get in the mix.
Everybody say it's time to press play.
Get in the
The
mix.
beat is dropping.
Get in the mix.
Feet are stomping.
Get in the mix.
Everybody say it's time to press play.
Oh, oh, oh.
Press play.
Oh, oh, oh.
Press play.
Jesus, we know we belong here because of your love for us that goes on and on forever. Jesus, we know you are with us wherever we go. You're there, we'll always be together.
So sing along with me for all the joy he brings.
It's going down. Get in the mix.
We're not stopping.
Get in the
The
mix.
party's hopping.
Get in the mix.
Everybody say it's time to press play.
Get in the
The
mix.
beat is dropping.
Get in the mix.
Feet are stomping.
Get in the mix.
Everybody say it's time to press play.
Oh, oh, oh.
Press play.
Oh, oh, oh.
Press play.
Oh, oh.
Press play.
Oh, oh,
Press play. All right. We're gonna break it down one time, y'all. You gotta sing it out with all you got. Y'all ready? Come on. Clap your hands like this. Have confidence to get in the mix. Clap your hands like this. Have confidence to get in the mix. Now clap your hands like this. Have confidence to get in the mix. Now clap your hands like this. Everybody get in the mix.
Get in the mix.
We're not stopping.
Get in the
The
mix.
party's hopping.
Get in the mix.
Everybody say it's time to press play.
Get in the
The
mix.
beat is dropping.
Get in the mix.
Feet are stomping.
Get in the mix.
Everybody say it's time to press play.
Oh, oh, oh. Get in the mix.
Press play.
Oh, oh, oh. Get in the mix.
Press play.
Oh, oh, oh. Get in the mix.
Press play.
Oh, oh, oh.
Press play.
Hey everyone, I'm Graham, and I'm here to give you a little bit of confidence. Confidence is learning to see yourself the way God sees you. When you're confident, you don't just sit around waiting for something to happen. No, when there's a game to be played, you get off the bench and play. When there's a challenge to be met, you face it head on. When there's music to be played, you get in the mix, grab an instrument, and make some noise. See what I mean? Confidence. Believe it or not, some people think the triangle isn't that important of an instrument. The band could get along just fine without it. But we know better, don't we? I mean, how else would you know when someone on TV had a good idea? Or how would you know when someone had the right answer on a game show? The answer is the Yangtze River. And of course, who can forget the dinner bell? Come and get it! Sometimes something that doesn't seem important can make a big difference. And in today's story, we'll see how God used someone who didn't think he was important. And that someone's name was Gideon? Right, Gideon. See you in a bit.
The Bible. It's 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry that fit together to form God's one big story. The epic adventure of how he created us and loves us so much that he made a way to rescue us. As we travel through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, we discover people who met God and found their lives changed forever. Now, for an amazing story, inspired by the book of Judges, chapters 6 through 8.
As many times before, the Israelites turned away from God. He allowed the Midianites to take over their land. God's people hid out in caves. When they tried to grow plants or tend to livestock, the Midianites would show up and destroy their crops and animals. At last, the Israelites cried out to God for help. He heard them and sent the angel of the Lord to a man named Gideon, who was threshing grain in a winepress.
Mighty warrior, the Lord is with you.
All Gideon could do for a moment was stop and stare.
Pardon me, sir. You said the Lord is with us? Then why has all this happened? The Lord has deserted us.
You are strong. Go and save Israel from the power of Midian. I am sending you.
Pardon me, sir, but how can I possibly save Israel? My family is the weakest in the tribe, and I'm the least important member.
I will be with you.
Even with a direct message from the Lord, Gideon was still nervous about the whole thing.
Give me a special sign. Then I'll know it's really you talking to me.
So God gave Gideon a sign, sending fire to burn up meat and bread. God's spirit was with Gideon. And when the Midianites and the Amalekites gathered to attack, Gideon sounded a trumpet for the Israelites to follow him. But even as the army gathered, Gideon once again pleaded to God for another sign. God responded by letting dew fall on a fleece, and then on the next day, only on the ground surrounding it.
Okay, I've got it. Thank you.
At last, Gideon was convinced God wanted to use him. He camped with 32,000 men at the spring of Harod and prepared for battle. Here, God spoke again.
I want to hand Midian over to you, but you have too many men.
Too many?
Israel might brag, my own strength has saved me. Announce to the army, those who tremble with fear can turn back.
Gideon did just as the Lord instructed.
There, Lord. 22,000 men have gone home. Only 10,000 left to fight.
There are still too many men.
Have you seen the Midianite army?
Take the men down to the water. There I will reduce the number of them for you.
Even though it must have worried Gideon to lose more of his army, he did just as the Lord said.
Field trip to the lake, everyone!
At the water's edge, the Lord said,
Some men will drink the way dogs do. They will lap up the water with their tongues. Separate them from those who get down on their knees to drink.
Gideon watched carefully. Most men got on their knees and drank directly from the water, but 300 men cupped the water in their hands and lifted them to their mouths to lap.
So, God, I send those 300 men home and keep the other 9,700, right?
With the help of the 300 men who lapped up the water, I will save you. Let all the other men go home.
Oh. Okay. Yes.
Gideon sent home every single person in the army except those 300 men.
Get some sleep. Tomorrow we will figure out what's next.
That night, the Lord spoke to Gideon once more.
Get up.
What? Oh, I'm awake.
Gideon stumbled out of his tent. Below, the campfires and torches of the enemy armies covered the entire valley.
So many. Like a swarm of locusts.
Go down to the camp. Listen to what they are saying. After that, you will not be afraid to attack.
Wondering if he might be dreaming, Gideon snuck down the mountain to hover in the shadows at the edge of the camp. He could hear voices from a nearby tent.
I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came rolling into the camp. It hit the tent with great force and knocked it flat.
Wow, but that can only be the sword of Gideon from Israel. God has given him the whole camp.
Gideon listened in shock.
Wow, God. Thank you.
At once, Gideon scrambled back up the hill to the Israelite camp.
Get up! Get up! The Lord has handed the Midianites over to you.
Quickly, Gideon separated the 300 men into 3 groups and handed each one a trumpet and a clay jar with a torch inside.
Watch me. Do what I do. I'll go to the edge of the enemy camp. Then we'll blow our trumpets from all around the camp and shout, "For the Lord and for Gideon!"
Gideon and his men headed quietly down the slope, fanning out in groups to surround the vast enemy camp.
Okay, get ready.
As soon as Gideon sounded his trumpet, he smashed his jar so the torch shone brightly. The other 300 men did the same.
For the Lord! A sword for the Lord! Gideon!
The Israelites held their ground, but their enemies panicked, confused by the trumpets and bright lights that pierced the dark night.
They're coming from everywhere!
The enemy armies were so confused, they began to fight each other, and then they fled in fear.
After the men!
Gideon and the Israelites chased their enemies all the way to the Jordan River and beyond until all the enemy armies were destroyed. The Israelites begged Gideon to rule over them.
I will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you.
Yep, Gideon was an underdog, filled with doubt, but he still chose to follow God, and God used him to save the Israelites.
According to Gideon, he was the least important family member and the weakest family of his tribe. He certainly didn't think God would use him to lead an army to victory over their enemies, but sometimes God uses people who don't seem important to make a big difference. You see this all through the Bible. Think of Jesus. He didn't pick the strongest, smartest, and most holy people to be his 12 closest friends. He picked regular guys, fishermen and tax collectors to be his disciples, and they went on to make a huge difference in the world. Hey, maybe that means God can use someone like me too, or someone like you. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to be important. God can do big things through us. Maybe he can use you to help a friend who's having a bad day. Maybe he can use you to solve a problem in your community. Or you might invent something that's never existed before. You might not think you're that important, and you might not think you're ready to make any kind of big difference. But the truth is, God thinks you're important, and he's totally ready to use you for something amazing. That's the one thing to remember today. God can use you no matter what. Knowing that should give you a little confidence. Why is my mouth watering? Oh, must be dinner time. I'll see you around.